Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. I am crashing into this one this week. I have been busy all day and I had two podcast recordings. We have so much new content coming out for you today. It's amazing, and so many new listeners have arrived, especially in the audio version of the podcast, and especially um in the especially for the weekly interviews and everything. It's been magical and amazing. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening. I see we already even have some people watching tonight, which is really fantastic. Not everybody always makes it in for the news hour, but I'm so happy to have people coming by and watching. So there's so much going on this week. I want to do a big shout out to all of our friends in Southern California who are choking through the air and may have lost homes, depending on where they live, and all this type of thing. Our thoughts go out with everybody. There's a lot of celebrities who've lost their homes, a lot of just regular, ordinary people who've lost their homes, a lot of elderly people who've lived in the same house for decades have lost their homes. And it's a true tragedy. The political finger pointing has already started. Gavin Newsom was down there, and they were like, "Oh, why is there no water in the fire hydrants? Because everybody needed a fire hydrant all at once, and there was no water pressure, and why wasn't there more water, and all this sort of thing." And I read a thread on Twitter about the water reserve and the water tank reservoir, and how it's partially privately owned and to serve agricultural interests in the Central Valley. And so it's the West. Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over, and Lord knows with a fire the fight is on. um there's a lot of talk about climate change and all this type of thing. The reality is Southern California ecologically is supposed to burn. um there are plants in the hills that don't reproduce until fire comes. And so what's really in the way of these natural processes is humanity. We decided to build our second largest city in a desert that burns. So it's these are, terrible and tragic times, and I would remind everyone to think of the people, think of the humans, think of the animals, think of everything, and the lives. A lot of stuff is has been lost. 10 people have passed from the fires. All the fires are only modestly contained. There's been an unconfirmed rumor of an arsonist that started one fire. Don't look into that too far because I haven't found if that's a real credible thing. But there's have been rumors floating around about that. Sometimes Henry Winkler on Twitter was talking about it. Yeah, that's kind of been the big story of the week. The other one, we are T minus 6 days from the shutdown of TikTok. So the law that was passed to force ByteDance, a Chinese company, to divest of TikTok in America, is has until January the 19th to sell or cease operations. TikTok America has said they're not going to sell, so they'll have to cease operations on January 19th. So there's only a matter of days before TikTok goes away. So there's already kind of talk of where people are going to go, and there's kind of, interestingly enough, a very kind of anti Mark Zuckerberg meta thing, which goes into, I think we either talked about it last week or we'll talk about it now. Um, Getting into, kind of against meta. I think we're going to talk about it now because he was on Joe Rogan talking about his ending of censorship and going to a community notes information model similar to X, and also revealed that the Biden administration had pressured them to take down anti-vax and vaccine side effects content from Facebook for fear people wouldn't uptake to the vaccine. Um, and so And he's kind of in his new era, but there's kind of a backlash against not going back to Meta. But then there's also people who, um, are thinking like, oh, we'll just go back to YouTube sort of thing. Everyone's feeling a little bit homeless. TikTok was a very, because of the algorithm being so good at serving up content people wanted, and so many people had found community, had met new people they would have never met before, all this type of thing. There's already a sense of like pre-loss about the loss of TikTok and the incoming ban. Um, some people have tried the Chinese version called Red Note is on the Apple App Store, and there's already sort of a movement to download Red Note and kind of rebuild TikTok over there. It's all in Chinese. You can turn the controls to English, but like all the comments, most of the videos are Chinese, and so there's kind of this whole thing of just maybe like moving to that. But it's also, you need all the big creator accounts to move over there as well. I don't know that I'm ever gonna go over Red Note. I don't really have a. I have my own axe to grind with Meta, but it's not the axe everyone else has to grind. So I'm content to just have my Instagram Reels and my YouTube Shorts. I'll definitely miss the traffic and the audience. It was a great chance for me to bring the news and my own stuff to a whole new audience, a whole new group of people, and I got a few couple thousand followers over there and all that sort of thing. So that's its own its own tragedy, but that's coming. The last I'd heard, they were arguing in front of the Supreme Court today about the free speech grounds and whether the Supreme Court was going to stop the ban from going through. Nobody, no, I have not heard since then what the outcome of those arguments was. I don't believe the Supreme Court was going to rule today, but I haven't heard any reflections about what the arguments were or anything like that. So, yeah, so it's still pending. Don't know what we're going to what the outcome of all that is going to be, but we're still. I was checking my news alerts, and no, there's no latest information on that. But that's kind of where we're at with the week. This week has been crazy. It's the second working week of January. Last week was so much I felt like I needed a week off from my week. So much happened last week. And it's going to be even more crazy this week. I have 7 podcast recordings this week, which means we're going to have a lot of new content coming down the pike for everybody, which is really exciting. On Wednesday, we have a really great guest on, which is going to be really, really important. So, yeah. So let's dig into the headlines, shall we? Let's get into it. So we have so many sort of just things going on. Let me switch to. There we go. So our first story this evening is going to be on the release of the Jack Smith special counsel case. So it says here the judge allowed. Let me put my glasses on so I can see something. I'm getting to that age. Judge allows release of half of special counsel's report on Trump cases. Judge Helene M. Cannon, who dismissed the classified documents case, blocked a volume about that matter from being shown to Congress, but allowed the release of a volume about the election case. A federal judge in Florida cleared the way on Monday for the Justice Department to soon release a portion of a report written by the special counsel Jack Smith detailing the decisions he made in charging President-elect Donald J. Trump with plotting to overturn his loss in the 2020 election. But in the 5-page order, the judge, Helene M. Cannon, ruled that prosecutors and defense lawyers would have to appear before her in court on Friday to argue over whether the Justice Department could release to members of Congress the part of Mr. Smith's report detailing the case she oversaw, the one in which Mr. Trump was accused of refusing to return classified documents after he left office. Under the ruling, the Justice Department would be free to release that part of the report about the election case as early as just after midnight Tuesday morning. Mr. Trump's lawyers could still ask an appeals court or the Supreme Court to stop that part of Mr. Smith's report from coming out. Judge Cannon's order, filed in federal district court in Fort Pierce, Florida, was the latest twist in a week-long battle over the release of the 2-volume report, which represents Mr. Smith's final word on the 2 defunct criminal cases he brought against Mr. Trump. And so it goes into the detail. It says Judge Cannon suggested that much of the hearing on Friday may need to take place behind closed doors to avoid public dissemination of any of the contents of the classified documents volume. And obviously they've dropped these cases now, and so it's now really just a matter of releasing the report. In a brief note, Judge Cannon wrote that she was not persuaded by the government's view that because prosecutors have appealed her injunction to an appeals court that she has no jurisdiction over the matter. Citing the possibility that the appeals court would overturn her early decision to dismiss the case, she argued that she has a continuing responsibility to protect Mr. Notta's and Mr. de Oliveira's right to a fair trial by making sure that the documents report does not come out prematurely and taint any jury pool. The possibility that a release of the report could infringe on Mr. Notta's and Mr. de Oliveira's rights to a fair trial, she wrote, clearly activates her obligation to preserve the integrity of this proceeding. So, it's, yeah, so of these two cases, it appears we might get at least half of the report. Honestly, I think it's the most interesting part of the report. The documents case was always dumb. I was always more interested in the election interference case. I was always more interested in, especially the one in Georgia, because we have him on tape saying, I need 11,000 and change votes, to Brian Kemp, who was then Secretary of State, now Governor of Georgia. I'm like, oh, I was always more interested in that end of things, especially given some of the tie-ins with the FSB in Russia, especially given with some of the tie-ins with Oleg Deripaska, this sort of thing. I will be very interested to see if that actually comes out tonight. That would be a little under 4 hours and 45 minutes from right now at 7 p.m., 7:16 p.m. Eastern, and so Standard Time. And so it would be interesting to see if that comes out. That always had more, of all the Trump cases, that one was the one I always thought we should see the end of. The documents case I didn't care about, because based upon what came out, it seems like if you're president, you just kind of grab some stuff on the way out the door. So that never, I think, was ever going to go anywhere. The election interference stuff was what had veracity. What happened in Georgia was what had veracity. And so I think the most interesting part of the documents case, or the most interesting part of the two cases, the election case, is what should come out anyway. And I would be interested to see what really is in all of that, given that Trump spent 4 years after 2020 claiming it was stolen, stop the steal, all this type of thing, and this encouraged a lot of states to pass extremely draconian, election voting laws, ranging in everything from simple ID, which incidentally I agree with, all the way up, to, shortening, voting and making absentee and voting by mail almost impossible, insisting on in-person voting, all this sort of thing. It was, the variety of those things, happened, and always definitely, depresses turnout even among eligible voters. So I think it will be a nice cherry on top to find out the full story of what actually happened with the 2020 election and how bad it really was. Now, as with so many things in this day and age, it may be that it was the complete opposite of what we think we know. That's happened before. May happen again, at which point we're going to have a bigger issue. But I think it will be, either way, it will be interesting. No matter where you are on that, what you think about that, it will be interesting no matter how you cut it. So, let's move on. This Twitter thread, yes. Maybe not necessarily the one that I wanted to talk with, though I'm going to bring over the ProPublica article about the militias, because I do want to get into that. So, this was interesting. So, Noah Smith, who's blocked me on Twitter, although I can see his tweets now because of how, Elon changed things, conservatism is a lot more popular than Trump specifically. Democrats who would never dream of supporting Trump are becoming more conservative with respect to urban issues and cultural issues. And I wanted to talk about this because there's this sort of idea, trend, whatever have you, of like, oh, it's not cool to be liberal anymore. It's cool to be conservative again. Like, being liberal has fallen out of favor. I had a fleeting thought I'm going to write down. I want already to begin writing the history of what I called the second progressive period, from roughly 2008 to about 2016, maybe 2020, maybe even 2024. And I think we should start writing the history of that now, because much like in the early 20th century, when we had the great period of progressivism roughly between 1902 to about World War One, which got us national forests, national parks, kind of capped off by women's right to vote in 1920, and also prohibition, sort of thing. When you had this sort of big progressive push and then a big drawback in the 20s, which is really caused by World War One, the pandemic for us, World War One for them, and then this kind of big pullback from that and a real retrenchment to conservatism. This happened between 1900 and 1925, and we've mirrored it somewhat. Again, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. We've sort of mirrored that in this progressive period, although ours really was sparked by the failures of the Bush administration. And so it begins in kind of 2008 with the election of Obama, and then it sort of ends with the second election of Donald Trump, which really cements the end of the second progressive period in this country. Um, and I want to talk about achievements and social and all this sort of thing, but then also understand what comes next. In the early 20th century, it was, about 9 years of economic growth punctuated by a giant depression. And then, tremendous, and but also the labor movement continued. And then also because of the depression, we got FDR, which got us, the New Deal and a huge leap forward of progress. So there may be hope yet, sort of thing. But it's worth writing about that now. And this thread kind of was what sparked that idea. And 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 her answer to this, I think, is very interesting, and I agree with it. It seems this way because in recent years have been somewhat of a mirage due to hyperpartisanship. In places like California and New York, most liberals have always been centrist capitalists who thought a lot of the left cultural agenda was silly, but they were willing to be team players as long as these campaigns of the left didn't hurt their opportunities, safety, choices, etc. The modern GOP is not an option for them because of stances on immigration, social safety net, abortion rights, etc. What's happening now is not them becoming more conservative. It's Democratic leadership not delivering the results they wanted and impacting some of those core personal issues. And them responding by saying, okay, let's step back a minute and make sure you as dumb leaders understand my real priorities, which have always been pretty centrist. San Francisco and New York City are full of people who are all for gay trans rights, abortion, social safety net, and equality for all, but also believe left goes too far with stuff like land acknowledgements, which I agree, those are so tedious. Big focus on pronouns, also tedious. Like intro circles, prison abolition, which is stupid, and environmental impact regs, also stupid. Um, and many coastal elites have always defined themselves as fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Now many are centrist Dems with a bit of libertarian bent. As I said, modern GOP not an option for them, so their goal now is to bend focus of Democratic Party to match their priorities. I'd characterize most professional class people in SF and NYC as capitalists first, liberal second, and that's why Noah's observation is absolutely unsurprising. And I would agree with that. I mean, there are some people, one of whom I was on the phone with right before I did this, um, who would say, oh yeah, it's Trump, it's MAGA, everything's becoming MAGA, it's a total takeover. And to some degree, I wouldn't disagree on that. To some degree, I I would say, like, yeah, I mean, I said right after the election, the left in this country, it's a white flag time. We're going to have to surrender and retrench and retreat because it's over. I've been saying that off and on. My first um, news hour broadcast following the election, I said that, and I said, look, we're going to have to get used to a lot of things, including the fact that this job now for me is an incredibly dangerous thing because if we start arresting journalists, we start going after the media, all this type of thing. I'm out here. I'm front and center. This job now got a whole lot more dangerous, and I have to learn to live with that. And it took me a hot minute to learn how to live with that, but I have, and I'm still here. But it is going, as I was saying at the beginning of talking about this, we have these big progressive pushes in this country, and then we have a retrenchment to the mean. We're having that retrenchment to the mean now. We're having that great pullback um, to something, and I think this thread kind of explains where it's at in terms of, yeah, let's get more centrist, yeah, let's deal, yay immigration and social and abortion rights, but let's also deal with core personal issues and make sure that there's opportunity, safety, and, ability to choose and all this sort of thing, and kind of leave a lot of the showy, performative stuff that was dumb and tedious, like land acknowledgements, behind. So, it's. I think this is an excellent description of where the Democratic Party is at right now. I think it's an excellent description of where the country's at right now. And I think a lot, and I've kind of felt this too. A lot of the progressive thoughts, language, ideas, philosophy that a lot of us have cut our teeth with, especially from like 2014 forward, maybe even earlier, 2012 forward. Because I came out of Occupy was where my liberalism started, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. A lot of that language and whatnot's going to go away. It's not going to be populism and fascism anymore. A lot of the thoughts and ideas are, and it's going to be enraging. And I was in an argument with somebody last week about all of this, of the way I covered a story. And it's like, yes, it's going to be enraging. Yeah, it's going to be, a difficult thing. It's going to seem like, oh, it's a conservative, onslaught, all this type of thing. But the reality is things are coming back down to earth. People need to sit back, take back, readjust, all this type of thing, and then make a move later on. As I said, the 1920s started with women's liberation, women's suffrage, and the start of prohibition, and the decade ended with the Great Depression. And then after 4 years, you got the largest progressive movement in American history between 1933 and 1945. So, there's hope, but it could be a long decade. My recommendation is enjoy the 20s while they roar, because, it could be good. Now, this is a story I saved from last week on a completely other bit of news. I saved from last week, and it was this really great story by Joshua Kaplan called The Militia and the Mole. And it's very long. I encourage you to read it. It's on ProPublica. And he is a wilderness survival trainer, and he spent years undercover, climbing the ranks of right-wing militias. He didn't talk to anybody, literally anybody. He got in with the new generation of militia leaders, and this is kind of all important because it's been said, it says here, experts say that militias could have a renaissance under Trump. They certainly had a good, fun time the first time around. And so he sent ProPublica a massive trove of documents. The conversations that he secretly recorded gave a unique, startling window into the militia movement. And so I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is long, but we're just going to cover some highlights. John Williams kept a backpack filled with everything he'd need to go out on the sun. Out on the run, I'm sorry. 3 pairs of socks, a few $100s cash, makeshift disguises, and lockpicking gear. Medical supplies, vitamins, and high-calorie energy gels, and thumb drives that each held more than 1,000 gigabytes of encrypted documents, which you could quickly distribute if you're about to be arrested or killed. On April 1st, 2023, Williams retrieved the bag from his closet and rushed to his car. He had no time to clean the dishes that had accumulated in his apartment. He did not know if armed men were out looking for him. He did not know if he would ever feel safe to return. He parked his car for the night in the foothills overlooking Salt Lake City and curled up his 6-foot 4-inch frame in the back seat of the 20-year-old Honda. This was his new home. And he made a recording to Joshua Kaplan. And it goes into his journey in these groups and recording their actions and uncovering and all this sort of thing. Gets into January 6th and sidearms and how he became a first militia member, and joining this AP3 group. It also how he, learned how to do this and be this character. Like I said, it's a very long story, but as someone who did master's work on terrorism and social warfare, this sort of undercover situation was absolutely fascinating. Obviously, we're not revealing his identity because that would be very dangerous. But it's a very interesting journey, and most importantly, and let me see, yes, the people involved in militias and especially Oath Keepers, all this type of thing, is, we all kind of think of it as a certain type, but it really is a little bit of everybody. And this part talks about that. It's doctors, it's lawyers, all this sort of thing. It's not necessarily it's people you would think would be there, but it's also people that you wouldn't think would be there. And that was the part that I found most sort of fascinating. It says by 2023, Williams' responsibilities were expanding as rapidly as his anxiety. His schedule was packed with events for AP3, the Oath Keepers, and a third militia he'd recently gotten inside. He vowed to infiltrate the Proud Boys and got Coates to vouch for him with the local chapter. He prepared plans to penetrate a notorious white supremacist group, too. His adversaries were gaining momentum as well. Williams soon made the 4-hour drive to Kinsh's house for another leadership meeting, and he was told on tape about a National Oath Keepers recruiting bump. They'd also found contact information for 40,000 former members, which they'd hoped to bring a flood of militiamen back into the fold. Despite the risk to his own safety and progress, Williams decided to send the journalist anonymous warnings from burner accounts. He attached sensitive screenshots so that they'd take him seriously. And then nothing. The reporters never responded. He wondered if the messages went to spam. His secret was still secure. And he talks about his undermining the movement and how he eventually, had to leave and escape, which is how the story started. And it gets into the 2024 election, how these groups obviously, were on the side of Trump and all this type of thing. It says here that he'd revealed he'd infiltrated the group as an independent activist and had sent me the files. He wanted to test how the militia would respond to news of a mole. The result was something he long had hoped for, a wave of paranoia inside AP3. It's a fucking risky thing to get involved in, the group's founder said in a private message. Trust nobody. There's turncoats everywhere. Said and declined to comment for the story, then he sent a short follow-up email, MAGA. Sowing that distrust is why Williams is going on the record, albeit without his original name. He still plans to release thousands of files after this article is published, evidence tying sheriffs and police officers to the movement, his proudest coup, plus other records he hopes could become ammo for lawsuits. But Williams wants to let his former comrades know. I'm not going to say that out loud, but let's read it together. He thinks his story could be his most effective weapon. Every time militia members make a phone call, attend a mini, or go to a gun range together, he wants them to be thinking in the back of their heads, this guy will betray me. And honestly, if you're gonna kill... I'm gonna save this because I want to post it. If you're gonna get rid of a movement, this sort of undercover sort of thing and creating that paranoia is the best way to do it. And that's why if you're an army occupying a territory, it's always difficult. It's always difficult to squash this stuff out. And I think it's, that bit I don't think I can say safely within the United States is always frightening because law enforcement is so involved in these organizations. Anyway, if you want to get into it, it's at ProPublica. I'll post it on socials. It's a really great article. Josh Kaplan's an amazing journalist. Kind of on the side of the side, after getting through that. So I don't know what's happened here. Well, I did kind of figure out what's happening here. This is a terrible situation. So, as we remember, last fall, Hurricane Helene came in and destroyed Western North Carolina. It's now winter, it's cold, it's terrible. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, FEMA has ended housing aid for a lot of Helene survivors. And thanks to WLOS in Asheville, they notified that on January 3rd, FEMA began notifying families checked into hotel or motel rooms that they're no longer eligible for FEMA's Transitional Sheltering Assistance Program, and that they're basically getting thrown out. It's January. It's cold. These people have no home, and they have nowhere to go. And it says that there are 3 primary reasons for the end of eligibility. It says, 1, an inspection indicated their home is now habitable. They declined an inspection, the inability to contact the applicant to update their housing needs despite multiple attempts. Through the Transitional Sheltering Assistance Program, FEMA pays directly to participating hotels and motels to cover the cost of the room taxes and non-refundable pet fees to provide short-term accommodations. And apparently, people had to be out by January 10th. It's not. Here's what I didn't. So when I started looking into this, here's what I did find out. Here's what I didn't find out. I found out that this is supposed to be temporary, and it's supposedly only people that have a livable home, didn't get inspected, or didn't get in contact. But it's also much bigger. It's, according to some things I read, it's like 30,000 people. I can't imagine that all of those homes are habitable. Some of them don't exist anymore. I can't imagine all. I mean, I'm sure some decline in inspection, but not all. And if you know the hotel that they're living in, it shouldn't be that hard to get a hold of them. Just show up. It smacks of bureaucratic failure, and it's an extra slap in the face because it's winter, it's cold, and as this person says, I have nowhere else to go but in the streets. I've called them several times. They have not answered anything. They have not extended. They told me I had to be out by January 10th, said Marlene Kramer, who was displaced by Helene. Um, it's just an absolutely terrible, tragic story. It's, these people have nowhere to go. Some people have local jobs, sometimes they don't. Either way, this is absolutely terrible and cruel. And I think it's really tragic that the first comment here is, unfortunately, we're not a socialist country. The handouts have to end at some point. This is just a terrible failure. And this is something where, honestly, I would say President Biden should, by signature, continue these people's housing until the new administration comes in. Just, continue till February 1st. Done. And move on. Because this is unacceptable. Simple as. It's just unacceptable. So, and especially amidst the fires in California, which is going to be even more FEMA stuff and aid and everything, Congress is going to need to fund FEMA to a large degree, because you have hurricane survivors, have fire survivors. We need to get better at dealing with natural disasters. This is a very cute story over here. Local cat's bravery during flood. Very cute cat. This is good. Okay, this is very good. Let me start by telling a story. So, we're going to get into this post in a minute. Years ago, I was reading a YouTube comment section, and this one account kind of said, wages in the US are going down to the global median, which means the standard of living is going to go down to the global median. And when I read it, I didn't understand what he meant. But it stuck with me. That whole idea that the wages are going to have to fall to the global median, which means the standard of living is going to have to fall to the global median. And I thought about that. Thought about it. And it just kind of stuck with me for years and years. And I looked into it a little bit, and it didn't seem to be the case, but I've just kind of always kept that in the back of my mind as an idea, as a concept. And so when I came across this, that thought immediately jumped to my head. And it gets into this post from Rakesh, Krishnan, and Simha, which goes off the whole Vivek Ramaswamy H-1B visa thing. It says here, why Tesla cut 19,000 jobs in 2024. Around 17 years ago, I interviewed a New Zealand business owner. He said something remarkable, quote, people in the Western world should be prepared to take a 30% income cut, unquote. His rationale was that the then income levels were not sustainable due to a variety of geopolitical and geoeconomic conditions. As much as Donald Trump wants to bring back manufacturing to the US, it's going to be hard to beat China. That's why Tesla has to cut jobs and salaries. It cannot pay workers $80,000 a year when China's BYD pays its workers $6,000 per year and makes them work 12-hour shifts with no overtime. Americans should accept that the good days are over and adjust their spending to reflect their new incomes. An average American home is filled with unnecessary toys, both kids and dads. It's appalling how much they spend on frivolous stuff and finally go into debt. If an Indian H-1B worker can live on $60,000 a year, the American can too. Delete your shopping apps, cook at home, eat meat once or twice a week. Get used to a lower standard of living because the world is different now. Okay? Tough pill to swallow. and then it gets into the comment section. Um, and I some of them are quite funny. This one is good. Quote, just accept that you will work more hours for less money and have less quality of life than your parents and grandparents. That ain't gonna go down the way they want. True. Um, and and is that it wouldn't be that hard to take 30% pay cut if the cost of rent, education, healthcare, and food went down 30%. It's not that people are spending on tons of luxuries living the high life, just living is very expensive, which is so, so true. But here's the I guess this kind of the frustrating kind of aspect of it all is it's never the conversation coming out of the whole H1B thing isn't, oh, we need to make sure we're hiring Americans. We need to make sure things in this country are going well. It's the, look, if you don't put up with all of this, we're just going to get someone way cheaper. And here's, I know it's not as high as it was when I first found this, but there was one comment that said $60,000 literally is the median income in this country. And especially, and I think that's even by household, because the actual average is far lower. But I love his advice: delete your shopping apps, cook at home, eat meat once or twice a week, and get used to a lower standard of living because the world is different now. It isn't, I mean, I'm not gonna say he's wrong. He's probably not wrong. And again, thinking back to that YouTube comment years ago, wages have to fall to the global median, which is way lower than we're used to in this country. Um, and I was thinking, like, okay, this is kind of them saying the quiet part out loud. Like, if you want to survive and you want to have to compete, I mean, I don't know anybody that would be able to afford to live on $6,000 a year in this country. There's nowhere where that is even possible. That's not possible anywhere in this country. So it's like, how much would you, if your plan to compete with China is by making American labor incredibly inexpensive, that also gets rid of the consumer market on which both economies depend. It's a race to the bottom. No one wins, you know? And China's labor isn't as cheap as it used to be either. It's been going up. That's why people have been moving to other parts of Southeast Asia. Like, and also, I mean, and here's kind of the separate. If he thinks this is a salient argument and that Americans should just get used to it and the good days are over, and just get with the smaller incomes, I mean, people will run him out of this country on a pitchfork and a splintery rail, tarred and feathered, before they'll just lay back and accept that. And also, I think it's a rather, kind of to the point of the original tweet, the argument is to work like a slave or be replaced by one. I think a lot of people are going to resist that at any idea, which is, I think, a lot of why people want to, I think the reason why Trump's populism is so appealing and putting up tariffs is so appealing is to bring, decent paying, non-educated jobs back to this country so that people can afford to live. I've heard multiple people say, it's just you can't afford to live in this country anymore. No one can afford this. I paid $10 for, I actually did. I paid $10 for 18 eggs the other day. I mean, we went grocery shopping here and it was $410 and it was 6 bags for 2 people. Very sad. Most of it was mine. I was very short on things. It's just absolutely insane. And some of these comments are so perfect. I don't know how a consumerist society is supposed to survive on zero shopping and personal investment. I would say we're going to have to start shutting down whole sectors of our useless and overvalued economy, starting with all packaging. Like, it's, it's, I mean, I don't think he realizes kind of how stupid this is, and how, how a lot of the reason why, a lot of the reason why people voted for Trump was to get a control on expenses. It was to get a control on all of this stuff, and also to get a control on other countries, being able to sell products here but not investing in this country. People are still trying to recover from outsourcing and offshoring from 20, 25 years ago. It's absolutely insane. And I think it's a difficult thing, but that's why people voted for Trump, was to put in tariffs, to put up trade barriers, because let's face it, and I've said this since I was in grad school, free trade has been great for the rest of the world. It has been really bad if you're a worker in a developed country. And that's not just us. That's Canada, that's the UK, that's France, that's Germany. It's been terrible for the workers of the first world. You've gotten cheap products, but your wages have stagnated, and you've not seen wage growth, and you've seen job opportunities evaporate, sort of thing. Um and I'll close on this one because it kind of reinforces the point. He's partly correct. Most Americans have been overconsuming, living well beyond their means for decades, made possible by the petrodollar reserve currency status. The rest of the world has not had such a privilege, and Americans who never travel overseas had no idea. So it's a fascinating debate. It's an ongoing conversation. I think people like him who think that Americans should just take it in the nose are going to find out how much Americans don't want to just take it on the nose. And I think if this becomes a kind of a tide to Indian workers and leadership as a brand, they're going to find out how racist this country can be. And trust me, very. We're running out of time. Let's cruise through these last couple stories. This was concerning. The Heritage Foundation plans to identify and target Wikipedia editors. The conservative think tank told prospective donors that the project was part of its work to combat anti-Semitism. It says here the Heritage Foundation plans, this is from Forward, a Jewish independent publication, the Heritage Foundation plans to, quote, identify and target volunteer editors on Wikipedia who it says are, quote, abusing their position, unquote, by publishing content the group believes to be anti-Semitic, according to documents obtained by the Forward. Employees of Heritage, the conservative think tank that produced the Project 2025 policy blueprint for the second Trump administration, said they plan to use facial recognition software and a database of hacked usernames and passwords in order to identify contributors to the online encyclopedia, who mostly work under pseudonyms. It's not clear exactly what kind of anti-Semitism the Wikipedia effort, which has not been previously reported, is intended to address, but in recent months, some Jewish groups have complained about a series of changes on the website relating to Israel, the war in Gaza, and its repercussions. In June, a panel of Wikipedia editors declared the Anti-Defamation League, quote, a generally unreliable source of information about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, limiting when the organization can be cited in Wikipedia articles, and there was an outcry this fall among some Jewish scholars and pro-Israel activists over edits to Wikipedia's entry for Zionism to add references to colonization. Wikipedia has also recently drawn ire from right-wing figures including Elon Musk, the billionaire who's been by President-elect Trump's side during much of the transition. Musk posted on X, formerly Twitter, in December, stop donating to Wokepedia. And I've also heard Musk is trying to buy Wikipedia as well. It goes on, but it is... I mean, there's multiple issues with this story, okay? We have a private organization targeting private people who are not employees or volunteers of Wikipedia. That's problem number one. Problem number two is how they're defining anti-Semitism. Problem number three has to do with using, stolen online data to basically dox these people, to target them, all this type of thing. And I think, honestly, number four is Wikipedia getting involved in the cultural political stuff. Now, I will say, as someone who, I tried to be a Wikipedia editor, but I was never any good at it, sort of thing, as someone who tried to get involved in all that, and who's heard about some of this stuff from people who are involved in it, Wikipedia is a very political place, and there's a lot of tension between liberal people who want Wikipedia to reflect a very certain progressive view and those who do not. A lot of the processes and things in Wikipedia, and a lot of the big contributors, and there's only a handful, I mean, most of Wikipedia is written by less than 100 people, they have struck a really good balance. I think part of the problem is you have a certain very small vocal minority that wants to take ever greater control of information and of narrative, because that's where the battle is now. It's battling what people think about this stuff. And that's a problem. I will say that's the fourth problem. So there's so many layers to this. Should the Heritage Foundation be doing this? Probably not. Is the anti-Semitism thing an issue? Maybe, because one could say that calling Zionist colonizers is anti-Semitic. I don't necessarily agree with that idea, but sure, let's go with that. You also have this whole idea of doxing volunteers who are doing this sort of thing. You also have Elon Musk trying to say, oh, let's defund them. I mean, that's the new, fun thing. Whatever it is, let's defund it. Let's undermine it financially. Not understand that people freely donate to this stuff. And you may not like something. I don't like the Heritage Foundation, but it continues to exist. Can't stop it. It's the same thing. Again, so many issues with this story. I don't necessarily want to get into unpacking all of them, although I kind of have already, but just something to be aware of. As I'm sure this story will continue to develop, we'll keep bringing it up as we go on, but I just wanted to kind of bring it up this week because it was interesting. What is this for? Oh, this is about the buying Greenland thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. This one, we're running out of time, so I may not get into this right now. This one is about this plan to build a crypto network nation in Greenland. And that... Yikes. No, the dystopia is not so boring anymore. Not by far. Not by far. There is, so it came from this Twitter account that, they want to build a network-free crypto blockchain city in Greenland, and that it's all backed by Peter Thiel, and it wants to be this kind of new digital nation. And there's a book from Balaji Srinivasan about the network state, and it says we started new currencies. Now the network state shows us how to start new cities and new countries. And his, Mark Andreessen's involved. It's a whole new plan. This is the whole thing, but basically the idea is they want Greenland so they can build a new city for them and leave the rest of us and our issues behind. Which is literally, there's so much literature where this happens and it never works out, like, ever, sort of thing. Like, it's giving Fire Festival, is my point. We talked about this last week a little bit. Musk attempting to buy governments in Germany, the UK, and France. Trump threatening to invade everyone. This is the part that I wanted to bring up. To all appearances, we're seeing the rise of a global cabal set about to turn the West, i.e. North America and Europe, into a giant fascist oligarchy. Fascism always comes with imperialism. Putin started his war against Ukraine because he wants to be remembered as Vlad the Great who restored the empire. It's all about his ego. Trump is easy to explain. Trump was 100% ego and id. He's looking at the return of imperialism and thinking, I could be Trump the Great, first president to expand the U.S. in over 100 years. In addition, while Trump claims Greenland is about national security, it's really about the grift. Buy, invade at taxpayer expense. Sell the strip mining rights to mining companies for $1 for a 100-year lease. And of course, require millions, billions in kickbacks. Militarily retake the Panama Canal. License one of Trump's Panama Papers LLCs to the management rights. Trump is all ego and grift. It's really that simple. But why is Musk supporting far-right, even Nazi parties? Far-right fascists are notoriously corrupt. Putin, Orban, Fico, Trump. They will gleefully sell their country out in exchange for power and money. That is the fascist oligarchy dynamic. And it goes on for a little bit about how these things work. But I wanted to bring this up because I've always felt, especially given what has recently happened, how really kind of under threat we are with kind of what's happening, in politics, especially internationally, with Elon Musk, his excessive power and control over the Trump administration. We know that Trump's in on the grift. He was in on the grift the first time. Him and his children and his family made millions, hundreds of millions, off the first presidency, which is funny because the Constitution expressly forbids using your office for personal gain. Trump has never read the Constitution. But I think the fact that this sort of right-wing fascist idea is spreading out to Europe as well, and they kind of want to bring all of Western civilization together as one big happy Western civilization family, I think could get very dangerous in ways that we don't yet expect. I've been sitting on an article, because I haven't finished it yet, called Elon Musk is not going to save Western civilization. Mostly because I don't think Western civilization needs saving, but he's clearly trying to make a power play. He bought this country for $277 million, and he's trying to buy Europe because he thinks that he can go through, break up regulations, bring everyone and everything closer together, and beat back immigration and do all of this stuff, and, really, just go against China and Russia and all this sort of thing. I read a tweet this morning. It said, people should understand this is not a clash of cultures, it's a clash of civilizations. And I was reminded of a very popular political science thinker named Samuel Huntington, who wrote after the fall of the Soviet Union, he wrote a paper called The Clash of Civilizations. And his argument was that there would be small, low-level, conflicts, border conflicts, all this type of thing. But the big narrative would be civilizational clash between East and West. And I think in a weird way, either Musk thinks that, and he's trying to get ready for it, or he's trying to set it up. One of the two. He either thinks it's already in progress, and he's trying to prepare for it, or he's trying to set that up. And either way, I think it's going to make living in this part of the world extremely profitable for some and very unpleasant for many of the rest of us, especially if you're not white, straight, male, don't be woman, don't be Jewish, don't be a minority, all this type of thing. So, bad times for Cameron, but I'm not Jewish, or anything like that, but it's, it was unfun times for Cameron and many of his friends. This is what happens in this sort of, expansion of, fascist oligarchy is a great way to describe it. All this sort of thing is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly dangerous, and it will make life more miserable for everyone. So, all right. I did 2 podcast interviews and this news hour. My voice is dead. We'll hit it back up to it next week. The interview today was a very nice hour-and-a-half conversation with Jesse Hirsch. He is a former hacker and broadcaster and journalist, and we talked about a little bit of everything, including topics covered here tonight, so make sure to check that out. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. We air every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Please make sure to share with your friends. Catch me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, at Cameron Cowan. You can watch me on TikTok for 6 more days, at Cameron Journal. And I'll be on YouTube Shorts after the ban, which they're already there. And then facebook.com/Cameron L. Cowan. So thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next Monday. Make sure to go to CameronJournal.com and subscribe to the newsletter. It comes out every Saturday right to your inbox. All right. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.